Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Welcome to the 24th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. And today I have a previous Kidney Stone Nutrition School student, Karen, who was excited to share her experience in finding me online and her experience working with me in Kidney Stone Nutrition School. It was so much fun reconnecting with Karen. It's been a while since I spoke with her in Kidney Stone Nutrition School. And so I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Let's welcome Karen to the podcast. Well, thank you, Karen, so much for taking the time to be on the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thanks. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure always to reconnect with old students, if you will, although you weren't
literally
weren't in the course too long ago, but still very good to see you. So I thought we would start with a little bit about you. So just, if whatever you want to share, tell us about you. Where do you live? What do you love to do? What's your life like?
Well, my life basically changed a bit in terms of the January 2022 incident where I actually had a kidney stone. And it changed in the sense of how I was approaching some of my health matters and everything like that. Basically, I am a Californian, but I have not lived there for over 20 years. I live in Washington, D.C. I am now retired, and I also was a former hospital administrator, which makes it a situation where as I approach healthcare, I approach it from a learner perspective with how I look at things. And so my interest, once I had a kidney stone, was to find as much as I could the cause, what I could do about it, and how I would change what I was doing, because there was perhaps something that had contributed to the development of a stone. Now, you have to appreciate that I was at a academic medical center in San Francisco when I was an administrator, and so I was on the forefront of a lot of medicine, including lithotripsy. And my knowledge in working as a liaison to many of the medical departments, whether it was nephrology, which was one of them, or it was, many other departments in terms of neurosurgery, et cetera. The fact is that when we experience it ourselves, it always makes a difference. And so I approached it both as a consumer, as experiencing something, and then thought about how I could logically go through it. So that just gives you a little idea of who I am as a person. And the journey to find you was most interesting, but I'll pause there and see if you have a question.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I understand more about why we jive so well, because as you know, so much of my stuff is about teaching people why we're doing what we're doing. I think it's, at least that's my opinion, is that I think that it's very important to understand, again, why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you're just doing something because my doctor told you to, that's not very motivating, right? You need to kind of understand what's going on in my body and how is this going to make it better. And so I really try to incorporate that into a lot of my content. So it sounds like perhaps that shone through.
That definitely was a critical factor, but it's also something in terms of medicine that I have noticed in terms of the practice of medicine, particularly in the United States. And that is, we as a society do not incorporate, and certainly our insurers do not incorporate the value of nutrition. And our doctors are the least knowledgeable about nutrition, I would say, of all the health matters that we have. And we are a society that goes to pills, goes to programs, processes, but not really looking at the fact that the human body is a very complicated mechanical and chemical system. And that, I think, is something where a nutritionist comes in to play very heavily. And so for me, it was looking for someone that could be knowledgeable, not about nutrition in general, but about the nutrition related to kidney stones. And what I found was actually very surprising. And that is, there is no kidney stone expert in nutrition as a registered dietitian in what we call the DMV area. Now, to anyone in a practical matter, especially a Californian, that means the Department of Motor Vehicles.
That's what it means to me as well.
However, in this area, it means District, Maryland, and Virginia.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. So that's helpful.
It is trivia in terms of all of the acronyms. And I think that that's another difficulty that we have, particularly in terms of medicine or when we're talking about things, is the notion of the work that you do, particularly as a nutritionist, one who specializes in kidney nutrition, kidney stones in particular. There's a lot of language and there's a lot of shortcuts to that language. And when you get test results as a consumer, what you get are sheets of paper that quite honestly are daunting in terms of what you're supposed to read and what you're supposed to look at and everything. And as you look at those things, it causes many people to say, I never liked chemistry when I had to take it, and I still don't really like chemistry. But here's the as I searched and I was finding that all roads seem to lead to Chicago, which was very surprising because, of course, I'm University of California, San Francisco.
Yeah. And now East Coast. So
and now East Coast. So I think of Johns Hopkins, which is where my current urologist is practicing. I think of all of these things and places, and I've always known in terms of the specialization. But what I really valued was to find that very strong link of the practices going on at the University of Chicago with the value of nutritionists. And there's another thing that I really value. When I was searching and I was looking up and your name popped up, and it was all through just diligent searching. When your name popped up, the most important thing to me was that you were not only a registered dietitian, you not only were working at the University of Chicago with a very fine group, you not only were with the group that basically developed the 24-hour urine test, spun off a company, Litholink, and the rest is history in terms of that regard, but you were first author on some papers where physicians were second authors. And I noticed that. And I went and I found
dietitians.
Found those papers. I read those papers because that's part of how I learned, because I wanted to understand your thinking before I ever contacted you. So when I went to your site, I found an enthusiastic person that holds a bunch of celery smiling, or celery, depending on your pronunciation. Oh. And I found someone who was energetic. And I found someone who was personable. But what I really found was that person was extremely knowledgeable, passionate, clear, and able to communicate on a very important matter, and had a system and a program. And believe you me, when I look at it and I look at, okay, yeah, am I going to do this? Is this just marketing? What is this really? And what I realized was that, there's so much behind this in terms of the science and the education of this individual, and frankly, the institution that you were working at the time. I said, I've got to figure this out. And there's nobody locally. And physicians, I have a very, very good urologist. We can talk about him if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, through Karen's recommendation, I have spoken with her urologist, and he is a wonderful, wonderful doctor.
is absolutely fabulous. So I didn't have to ever argue about some of the things that you have to advise people on in terms of the value of a 24-hour urine test.
That makes it easier for sure.
It makes it much easier. And also I've been able to partner with him in terms of my care. But most importantly, you have educated me, as well as many, many others, through a system that is more than just understanding how to interpret a 24-hour urine test, which is one of the keys that we have as a tool to know what's going on in our bodies. But I had a 3 millimeter stone. I captured that stone. I photographed that stone with a special ruler to show exactly what size it was. I submitted that stone, and I had a diagnosis of the type of stone I had. That is valuable because it simply helped know what was going on. And there were things we found out. I was taking calcium supplements, which I think women are encouraged to do, particularly as they reach a certain age. And there's all sorts of different ways that you can take those. But my primary care was not advising based on the type of calcium supplement. So a calcium carbonate is really not necessarily a good thing. A calcium citrate might be slightly better, but it has to go to the right place in your body. Your body has to take that and process that so that it doesn't go where mine was going.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got the kidney stone, I think just before that, I had been advised that I should take an additional calcium supplement at night because I had osteopenia.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing to me because calcium is obviously important. You know that I talk calcium day in, day out, all day. But it's so amazing that I think this is just kind of a just laziness / mark of how our society approaches nutrition. We think, oh, calcium is important for you as a older woman, and so we need to give you a pill, right? And we don't even think about like, hey, like what is she eating? Is she already getting enough calcium? Does she drink milk? Does she eat yogurt? Right? And it's like, I think again, it's partially laziness. Like, oh, it's easier to take a pill for sure than go in and like assess how much are you eating? Are you getting enough? And also maybe a trust factor. Do we trust you as the patient to go on with your life and make sure you are getting in enough food or enough calcium from food? So a bit of a tangent there, but that's something that I feel like comes up so often, whether we're talking about calcium or magnesium or like all sorts of things. It's so funny to me that we just as unfortunately a medical society and definitely as a culture, in the world we live in, just kind of jump to supplements, but really getting the stuff from food is going to be a whole lot better anyway.
It is. And with all due respect, what I started out in terms of this conversation is that there is not an emphasis in medical education for physicians in terms of the value of nutrition. And unfortunately, even in our school systems, it really is not there as well. But as an individual, I needed to understand what was going on. And you are the person that actually provided that through your courses, through going through not only the courses, but in a way that allows the individual to go back, to pause, to rewind, to have those courses available to us. You say forever, nothing's really forever.
As long as it's in existence.
but it's a very valuable tool, because having just had my annual 24-hour urine test, and I also have an ultrasound, which is a bladder ultrasound, bladder kidney ultrasound, that is able to see if there's anything that might be occurring in those areas. Mm-hmm. what it is that I can go back, and when I look at the test and I say, okay, now let me see if I'm looking at my magnesium and it's done this, then I can look at that and I can say, okay, I want to go back and I want to see what Melanie said about magnesium, because I remember we had a lot of magnesium. The other part that's very important is that I find that your, what I call bumps, in terms of when you send out information about what we can and we can't do, in essence, in terms of eating, those little snippets that you send out via email to
just kind of remind you that I exist. And
it's not even, well, okay.
like, hey, don't
All
forget
right.
about your kidney stones. Is that what you're saying?
Right. But what it's really saying is that your whole approach is really not to focus on oxalates. And if you focus on oxalates and you try and have a conversation,
You're missing the point.
you're missing the point. But also you're really irritating your friends. Because your friends are like, nobody's mentioned what is an oxalate? Nobody's mentioned oxalates. And I find that I don't really need to particularly worry about oxalates, but what you also gave permission to do. And when I say give permission, you didn't say, Karen, it's okay if you do this.
I never tell you what to do. I just provide you with education.
But what you really did was you brought a balance back when there's a very scary event in your life. And for anyone who hasn't had a kidney stone, it is a very painful eye-opener. But the most important part was that I don't have to do it out of fear now. I can do it because I'm educated much better than I was. And that is because of what you offer. I can still have a little bit of chocolate. Chocolate is high in oxalates. Okay.
It's also delicious.
Also delicious. If someone serves a salad and there's some spinach leaves in it, and I'm at their home, I say, thank you very much. If there's a lot of spinach leaves, I may kind of push some of them aside, but I know that I can have a few of those. I know that I'm just not going to go all out for a spinach salad as a main course. So it's important things like that. But all of the other things in terms of being with people, when people ask me, well, what are your dietary restrictions? There's only two things I tell them. Because I don't really talk about having kidney stones. I don't say, oh, woe is me. I basically say, well, I'm basically low salt and low sugar.
Which is honestly what all of us should be doing as well. Or not too much, right? Right. You're just not eating excessive amounts, which is...
I'm not eating excessive amounts. So your education, your programs, you as an individual, because there's one other thing that I haven't said. Melanie, you take an interest in every one of the individuals. It doesn't matter what our age is, what our location is, what our education is, what our lifestyle is. You start with the person where they're coming from and you work with that person. You're not changing a person. You're finding a way that that person can choose to change themselves if they want to in terms of their kidney health.
Well, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. And you hit on so many of the reasons why I started the kidney dietitian in the first place. I started this as just a side thing when I was working at the University of Chicago. And, I was learning so much from some of the world famous kidney stone doctors there. And it was just mind blowing to me how dietitians don't know this. I knew nothing about kidney stones before I started working. I knew nothing about kidneys. It was like it just wasn't part of my education. It's not part of most dietitians' education. So I was just like floored that nutrition does impact kidney health and kidney stones specifically so much. And also even more floored with how little the education patients get when they have kidney stones. 1 in 10 people in the US, probably more honestly, will have a kidney stone at some point in their life. And the number of people who get any sort of diet education is dismal. It is around 8% of urology offices have a dietitian at all. which means that even less of patients with stones are getting, some sort of dietitian education. And even more so, the education that most urologists get in terms of prevention is not much. Actually, Karen's urologist is the one that kind of clued me into how all of it works. And the way he explained it was essentially that most urology fellowships don't incorporate prevention in at all. Not to say that they don't know anything, right? Urologists are really good at getting rid of stones. That's what they do. That's their task. And they're typically pretty good at it. But they're not dietitians. And Karen, you mentioned how doctors, tend to know very much about nutrition, and I would probably agree. But I think that's probably okay. That's why dietitians exist. I cannot be a doctor. I cannot, there's things outside of my scope of practice. One person can't know it all, and the field of nutrition, just in general, and especially in kidney stone nutrition, has grown so much. There's so much to know. One person can't possibly know all of it. And that's why we have specialists. And so that's why I exist. So anyway, the reason I'm going on a tangent as well, and the reason that I started all of this and why I'm so passionate about what I do is that I really want to touch everyone. My vision is to touch everyone with kidney stones. I want everyone that has a stone to get personalized, individualized, quality, science-based nutrition education. And via my course, I'm able to touch tons of people. And through my website and through my social media channels, right, I can really, it's kind of mind-blowing and very, very humbling to think about how many people I touch every single day. Somewhere around 10,000 people I touch every single day between, someone who comes to my website or sees a social media post or something, which is so cool. And so hopefully all of this will help me meet my vision of improving the nutrition, kidney stone care of everyone in the world that gets a kidney stone. That's a big vision, but that's what I'm here to do.
Well, and that is not only so true, but it does take, and it's so hard in terms of finding the right physician. And I think there's a couple of things that you're also doing that you didn't mention, and that is that you've launched a program to basically offer education opportunities to registered dietitians in the field to expand so that, because of the licensure situations as well. And it's very important from the standpoint of, you're not my dietitian. I live in Washington, D.C., you live in Chicago. If I wanted you as my dietitian, I would basically be flying to Chicago to see you. And it's not that I don't want you as my dietitian.
That's a lot.
but it's that you offered a hybrid for individuals, no matter where they're located.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also you're working to expand the network. And so sharing that knowledge and getting that excitement with this as a specialty for registered dietitians, I think is very important, because one of the things why there might not be more registered dietitians is not only the way that insurance is set up and the mechanisms.
That's a whole nother conversation.
It's a whole nother conversation. But it is actually that there just aren't people that are really there that know about this and that really understand about this. So I was very fortunate, because the ER actually recommended my physician. When I went to him and we were first talking, it was not only an instant connection, because he has the same kind of enthusiasm that you have with respect to what he does in his profession, which makes a difference. And we were able to connect. And then I saw him a few times. And as we were working through because of course, first you have to kind of figure everything out and figure out what you need to do. And as I was doing that, I basically, he had sort of said, well, it's hard to find people. There's this person that you might try and everything. I came back to him and I said, that person seems really nice, but they're not an RN. They're basically
an RD, not an RD.
They're not, no, they're not an RN, which is what he thought. They're not an RD. Oh. And I basically said, but I found someone. And then I described, and he said, first thing he said was, what's her name? The next thing we're sitting there talking, he turns the screen around. Is this her? I said, yep, that's her. He says, I'm going to get in touch with her. And he did. And I think that's the key thing in terms of building those connections. And to me, as a patient, because that's what I am now, as a patient, it's so important to see those connections and to know that I'm working with people that really care about what they're doing, because that makes a difference. Because also, I know I need to take care of myself. But as a patient, it's still so important to people to feel like they're not just a number. They're not just they're not just, you know how they write reports in terms of individuals. And here's the most common one, where they'll say, an unremarkable woman, of X age,
Yeah.
as,
Do people still write that? I haven't actually seen that in a chart.
I've seen it. I saw it a lot. So I think we all strive to be unremarkable when it comes.
Especially with your kidney stone doctor, you don't want to be marketable. Marketable.
But I refuse to accept. That I can't do anything about my own kidney stones. Yeah. I can't necessarily change certain things in terms of how I'm genetically made up and how some of my chemistry works, and why someone else may be able to take all the calcium supplements they want of any kind whatsoever, and it will never make a difference, and they'll never have a kidney stone, and they can eat all the beets they want or all the almonds or whatever it is. But I know that I need to really understand me, but to know that I have individuals that will work with me and that I can reach out to. So I know, even though I finished the course and that you offered in the course to read, one of my 24-hour urine tests, I know that while you're not my nutrition, that I can always send you a test just to read that test, interpret that test. Mm-hmm. That is something that is reasonable that you can do.
Yeah. I think what it seems like you're kind of describing the notion that I really want Kidney Stone Nutrition School, my online course, to be a community and not just a course you take for 6 weeks and then you're done and like I never see you again. I really want this, and I've tried to do my best to build it to be a comprehensive platform for you to go back to, in theory, for the rest of your life, or as long as the course exists in its current format, to be a reference for you, to be able to go back to those slides that I do try to update. Science changes all the time. Kidney stone nutrition is a relatively new field, and so there's a lot changing. And so I go in and make updates if significant things happen. And you're also in an online community and you have the group calls, right? Like all of these things, you have access to me through those platforms. And it just, I really want it to be a support system, because I think that's the thing that's missing most in so many areas of medicine, but especially kidney stones, is that people feel that they're not taken seriously and think, oh, it's just another kidney stone. It's just another unremarkable person with a kidney stone, like whatever. But there is so much that you can do, and everyone deserves to have access to that preventative care. I actually, a couple of weeks ago, recorded a podcast with Dr. Anna Zisman, one of the nephrologists at the University of Chicago. And the title of that episode, you can go back and listen to it, is Kidney Stones Are Preventable. That is her message that she wants to get out, and that message just isn't there. So many people get that message of, oh, you got a stone, now you're a stone former, like, that's the rest of your life. And that is not the way that it needs to be. There is something that every single person can do to prevent stones. Can I guarantee that you won't have another stone? Of course not. Like, that's not the way the world works. And if I did tell you that I can guarantee it, you should probably be running far away from me, because I'm just trying to sell you something, probably. But there are definitely things that you can do to reduce your risk of stones. And it's so important, as Karen talked about, to kind of like dive in to what's going on in your body. And the only way to know that is that 24-hour urine test. So you have that, you feel empowered to know, like, hey, what I'm doing is really going to make a difference based on my body chemistry, based on what's wrong, if you will, with my body that caused that stone. So there is hope. And I really want all of my content, but especially Kidney Stone Nutrition School, which is the way to work most directly with me, to be this not just education, but really kind of whole community and resource for you now and moving forward, if that makes sense.
And it's also, you go beyond that because you love to cook. And so
I do. That's why I'm a dietitian. I just love to eat.
you also offer in terms of recipes and such, and it's a little different kind of cooking than say I normally do, but I have found a lot of gems in
what's your favorite one? Could you pick one out?
Well, I think the favorite one is the crustless quiche.
Oh yeah, people love that. A lot of people mention that one.
So I look for dishes that I can serve to others. Another one is the red pepper sauce.
Oh, red pepper sauce. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the red pepper sauce gets a lot of good hits and everything like that. The other part, when you mentioned in terms of the community, that's really important. And what I found with that, and I'm not exactly the kind of groupie person to do those kinds of things, but there was such value in listening and learning and just being able to talk with others, because everybody's experience is a little bit different, but you find a common thread. And what I find is that it's so important to have that community as well. Mm-hmm. I have friends who have kidney stones. I have a friend who basically has had at least 5, 6, 7 kidney stones in his life. And it's like he knows when one is coming on and he just drives to the ER. I try not to be this is going to be the save all end all type of thing. I try to say, I really feel good about the fact that I feel like I have control of everything that I can do, and that I'm making good choices because I'm making educated choices, but I'm not suffering. I'm still very much enjoying food because of you. When a woman brought this, she's a great baker. She brings this cake to a dinner with friends. It is the most perfect 6-inch chocolate peanut butter cake. Realize the combination I just said, besides the sugar and everything, but it was beautifully done with Reese's Pieces, at the top and everything. And I looked at that and I thought, wow. And it was a birthday celebration for some folks. And I had a very small piece and I was satisfied. But that's the other part, is we have to have we do have to have a certain amount of control. So if I knew that I couldn't just have those 4 bites and be done, then I know that I couldn't have that at all.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of quote control around food is allowing yourself to have those foods and knowing that it's completely okay to have those foods. Because when you tell someone that you can never have whatever it is again, and that this food is bad, and that this is, first of all, that's just not true. All foods have value. I firmly believe that. And if you say you can never have it and you classified foods as good versus bad, it just makes you want it more. And you see that people who have actual binge eating disorder, it nearly always stems from that restriction. And then it's that restriction causes you to want it more. And then you feel like you're out of control, and then you feel bad and you restrict more, and then you binge again. So knowing it's not just allowing yourself to have these bad foods, like it's more about truly knowing like these foods are completely okay to have. They're not bad foods. Yes, they're maybe higher in oxalate. Yes, it's maybe higher in sugar, but that's okay. You're not aiming for 0 oxalate. No one should be aiming for 0 oxalate. No one should be aiming for 0 sugar, because what kind of life would that be to live? So it's really just kind of learning a balance that works for you, and truly believing in your soul that all foods are good foods, which is honestly very difficult to do in our culture of, keto diets. And you could go online on Google or on Instagram right now and find every single food that you've ever consumed being demonized for some reason. I guarantee it. It has oxalate in it, so it's going to quote poison you, or it has too much saturated fat, or it has too much sugar, or it has lectins, and like literally the list never ends about all these things that have been demonized. And it's just all silly. Like nutrition for kidney stones or otherwise is not about eating these foods and not eating other foods. It's all about putting together a healthy pattern of foods. That's what really makes a difference when it comes to health. It's not eating XYZ and not eating ABC or whatever it is.
You offer still a whole variety of snack food ideas. And of course, I guess your favorite is popcorn.
I love popcorn.
And to put other things on popcorn, I mean, there's spices that don't have salt in them, that are mixes of various herbs and that kind of thing, rubs that don't have salt in them, and those are really good to sprinkle on.
You can do so many things. I pop it on the stove with some canola oil, and I add just a little pinch of salt, and then I like to add pepper, or if I feel fancy, I'll use some like savory herbs like that, like a dill or rosemary. But usually I'm just lazy and just do a little bit of salt and pepper and call it a day. Because again, we're not aiming up just like a zero oxalate diet, a zero sodium diet would be just as unhealthy as well. Your body needs some sodium. So anyway, I digress. But there's ways to make every food fit in a kidney stone friendly meal pattern that's specific to your 24-hour urine tests for sure. I guarantee it.
So I can go back to having a slice of almond cake.
I think that would be fine. Have a glass of milk with it and call it a day.
It's endless with food. Food is one of the most magical things.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the many reasons why I'm so passionate about allowing people to eat their favorite foods, no matter what they are, is that food is nutrition, right? Food fuels our body and it can do wonderful things, but it also is so imperative and so important to our culture and social relationships. You mentioned many different friend and family gatherings, even just today in the podcast, and how that cake was for a birthday celebration, or whether it's Christmas or the holidays or traditions. It's just like you cannot separate food from those things. And I honestly, if you do try to separate food from that aspect of eating, it's probably not very healthy, because it's going to completely isolate you in many different ways and make you probably pretty unhappy. And it doesn't need to be like that. All food is good food. Well, Karen, as we're kind of coming to an end to our podcast, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone who is feeling frustrated and confused and unheard, all the things we were talking about that stone formers feel, feeling like their medical team isn't listening to them, what would be your advice to them to actually prevent those kidney stones?
My advice would be the same thing that we all need as human beings, and that is to find that social network of people that you can talk with, that you can learn from, and to educate yourself. I mean, but the most important thing is to not stay isolated, to not feel like you did something, or it's you, or that you can't change. It's very hard to change for everyone. But the fact is that working with other individuals that share in terms of a similar experience goes a long ways. And then being able to work with someone like yourself who was so enthusiastic. And I know that sounds like an advertisement. It's not. I truly, truly have finding a person like you truly gave me back a sense of control, and that it wasn't going to necessarily have to be a repeat experience. And I just encourage other people to reach out, to find that resource for them. And maybe they have it in their community, because there are a few individuals in terms of nutritionists that might really help with this. And there are other physicians, but to find that connection, find that community. And if you want to do it through the nutrition school, I couldn't recommend that more highly. I mean, quite honestly. And that's not, that's just us talking. And I think, I've consistently said that in terms of the experience. But I also know that my physician, my team behind me has also said, wow, yes. And basically you're building a structure that's going to help a lot of people, but we have to connect with others.
Yeah. Yeah, that community is so important and something we don't think about very often. That's great advice. All right. Well, thank you, Karen, so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. It was so wonderful chatting with you as always and reconnecting.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.